Okay, we are back. Red versus Blue, number 59. I have a slight cold, so you can kind of hear it in my voice. But nothing stops us from carrying on with this program. Right, Keith?
That's absolutely right, Mike.
So we got a few things to cover. Republican tax budget bill drama. And there's been a lot of it, hasn't there?
There has been. Mike Johnson is getting credit for herding the cats of the Republican caucus, the moderates from the blue states and the Freedom Caucus, so named, to finally get a bill passed through the House by one vote. One Republican voted present, two Republicans voted no. So it passed with one vote. It extends the 2017 Trump tax cuts. So contrary to a lot of the Democratic talking points, taxes will stay the same for everybody in the country based on the 2017 tax rates. It makes a modest improvement to the state and local tax deduction, which is important in New York, California, New Jersey. And there is a modest exemption of income on tips and overtime included in the bill, which were Trump campaign promises to pay for it. And it doesn't really get fully paid for, but it cuts state expanded Medicaid. The largest effect of that is actually going to be in the red states, where more people are on Medicaid than in the blue states. Proportionally. Trump and the Senate have been opposed to Medicaid cuts. Karl Rove had a piece today saying it's important for Republicans to stress that it means taking illegal aliens out of Medicaid and providing work requirements for able-bodied men who are in Medicaid. That's sort of a tough argument to make if you're one of the people who are going to get knocked off. And there's, 12, 14, 80, 40 million people who are potentially going to be affected by this. There are cuts throughout the rest of the government, too. PBS, the Coast Guard, military leadership, FAA, FEMA. Hurricane season starts June 1st. We've already announced we're not ready for that. We can't seem to land airplanes in Newark or at Reagan National in Washington. The FAA is down 2,000 people. The gutting of the Department of Education has been halted by the courts temporarily. So it's not exactly clear how much real savings are going to be in the bill. But for the past month, the Freedom Caucus members, Republicans, have trashed Republicans' own bill, the key linchpin of the Trump administration, because it will add $3.3 trillion to debt, and we have something like $23 trillion total in debt. All of that is true, despite all of the cuts, and the cuts are severe and they're going to be painful to people. It does really nothing about the deficit. And Republicans have been stepping on their own lines because there's $831 billion for the Golden Dome that Trump wants to have through the Defense Department. Perhaps $1 billion to refurbish our free aircraft that we got from Qatar, which is now valued at $200 million, not $400 million, now that it's been delivered. There's millions for a June military parade involving 70 aircraft and 700 trucks and 7,000 soldiers. So the bill in some form will be changed and pass the Senate and get passed. The Democrats are going to run on the spending cuts. Republicans will run on the tax cuts. It'll be a muddled message that will generally help Republicans because of the tax cuts, but will hurt Republicans in key districts, probably enough to give the Democrats control of the House.
Right. And there's a couple weird things that has happened through this that I see. I see Josh Hawley on every show that he can go on downplaying this bill because of the FEMA situation, because it affects his state directly, right?
Missouri is in Tornado Alley. Another big wrath of them are hit this past couple of weeks. So, yes, any place, particularly in the South, along the Mississippi River Valley, that's subject to hurricanes and tornadoes is going to get flattened. The Trump administration hasn't even helped Sarah Huckabee Sanders in Arkansas from their tornadoes earlier in the year. Trump is going to have Katrina times 3 trailing him if he doesn't figure out that he needs a functioning government to work. And this is where the Trump administration is already paying the price for having incompetent people in public jobs. I mean, you can put in your loyalists, you can put in your toadies, you can put in the people who say that you're the dear leader, but unless they can actually run the department and get the job done and deliver services, as Sean Kelly is learning at the Department of Transportation, they are going to reflect poorly on the president. And poor reflection is all over the place right now.
It is interesting on the FEMA issue that the Huckabees and the Hollies were not for helping out blue states when they had problems, but all of a sudden they need the money.
Somebody's hypocrisy is showing they need longer skirts.
Oh, that's funny. Also, no cut for Social Security, right?
No, they've increased the exemption for older people, but Social Security income was not made exempt by the bill, which was a promise by Trump that he failed to deliver on. It would have been breathtakingly expensive to do that, and it was not done.
And the tip thing, they didn't do it as much as they had hoped, right? It's a pared down situation, right?
They put a cap on it. They define the jobs that are subject to tips so that your lawyer can't say, my fee is $10 and I hope the tip be $5,000, because that would happen all over the economy. They did include gig workers like Uber drivers, but they've tried to limit it. It's got some phase outs. It's got some income limits at the top, because a lot of overtime, for example, is done by cops and firemen and longshoremen who end up making $2,000 and $3,000 a year. So
is it going to change how people feel about that?
Well, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, it could be for if you're a restaurant employee, I mean, this could make this be Christmas in May for you.
Right.
But it's going to be a relatively few amount of people who truly have a life-changing experience because of it. Gotcha.
Okay, next thing. The Biden healthcare cover-up. I have to side with Jon Stewart, who's saying that there was no cover-up. We all saw it play out in front of our eyes over the last 3 years. But Jake Tapper has written a book about it, and so he's taken a lot of fire for it. What is your take?
Well, a lot of my Republican friends think the book should have been entitled Original Sin or subtitled Evidence of a Cover-Up by Jake Tapper Reporting on Joe Biden, because Republicans take your position that everybody saw the guy was having trouble. I'm about 90 pages into the book, and what Tapper does do is he goes back to 2022 and 2023 and meetings with various congressmen in various parts of the world, and shows that there was ample evidence for everybody to see long before this leading up, and that there was a concerted conspiracy on the part of his core group of staff, they call themselves the Politburo, and Joe Biden, to reduce his schedule, to keep him hidden from the media, to keep him hidden from his cabinet and from other engagements. He had a 10-to-4 schedule,
right,
and basically minimize what the public could see about this. So that when Bob Hur in the special counsel's report says he, kind of a feeble old grandfather, everybody got up in arms. When you really look at see how he responded in the interviews with Hur, you realize he was hardly coherent.
Right.
It was a scary situation. And a lot of finger pointing is now going on among Democrats about who's responsible for this, because ultimately the point that Tapper makes in the book is that this is why the Democrats lost the election in 2024, was because they had a candidate who could not win, who could not do the job. They hid him, they protected him, they kept him out of the public eye. They ran the table on the nomination. They quick pitched it to Harris, who was not really ready for prime time.
Right.
And, they are, as much as anybody, are responsible for the Donald Trump administration. And I think there's some truth to that. Now, of course, this week the president was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and our hearts and thoughts and prayers go to him and his family about that. That's a horrible thing to have happen. It comes that information that he has not had a PSA test since 2014, more than 10 years. And it appears that the federal government recommends that after 70, you don't have a test because they produce a fair amount of false positives.
Right.
I will just tell you, I'm now in that category, and I intend to get it. I'm going to get a test every year, because if I can figure out how to deal with a false positive.
Yes. I get one every 6 months, by the way.
Well, and I think that's good advice for people. And I think this shines a light on the fact that whatever federal advice was that you shouldn't have a test after 70 is wrong. I mean, Sanjay Gupta says you should do it until you're within 10 years of your expected death. Well, I'm not exactly sure I can put the odds quite that close. So I'm going to continue to get one. But, Mike, there was a George Orwell quote that I'll close with on this relative to Biden that he used. He says, "We are all capable of believing things which we know to be untrue, and then, when we are proved wrong, imprudently twisting the facts so as to show we were right. To see what is in front of one's own nose needs a constant struggle." Yeah. Now, as you read the book, it becomes clear that perfectly describes what was going on in Biden world behind closed doors. But it is also true that is exactly what is happening in MAGA world with Trump. Every time he lies, every time he gets on, in front of a microphone and rambles, every time he tries to embarrass a national leader in the Oval Office by lying. And, his poker tell that he's lying is that his lips are moving. And people sort of begin to, accept that. But you can't, because everybody knows it.
Right.
And the issue is, does he know it? Does he really have the mental acuity to know when he's telling the truth or not? And he's negotiating world peace and doing all of these things. And there is a real question as to whether or not he's tethered to any sense of reality. And he manifests his disabilities obviously much differently than Joe Biden.
Right.
But they are there for the world to see, and the world is seeing them, and international adversaries and allies are reacting accordingly when they have to sit down and meet with the guy.
It is interesting how the two sides handle things differently. The Democrats locked him into a basement somewhere and kept him out of the sight. The Republicans, they just let Trump go on with whatever craziness he has. What is the end game there, you think?
Well, I think Biden listened to his advisors and Trump doesn't. That's number one. They figure they just can't control him. So, it's going to be Trump unfiltered until Trump decides he's just as soon go out on the golf course and shut up. But he is diminishing his own political capital. He's diminishing his own effectiveness. He's diminishing his own influence in the world every time he gets up and does that. And I'm hopeful that, when his term is over, that on a bipartisan basis, people will, just like they did after the Roosevelt 4 terms,
right,
will revisit this issue, and we'll have a constitutional amendment that says, you can't be president if you'll be 80 years old or 75 or whatever the cutoff age is during your term of office. And I think Americans are going to be tired of octogenarians by the time they're done with these two.
Right, and that looks like something that would get bipartisan support. I don't know for a fact, but it sounds like it might.
You would certainly hope so.
Right, exactly. Okay, well, he's not old, but it seems like he's gone or almost gone. Elon Musk, what's going on there?
The Duke of Doge is, the Atlantic had an article titled "The Decline and Fall of Elon Musk." He hit the ground with much fanfare and much chaos, creating cuts and big balls and having people, document in emails the 5 things they did the day before. His savings have been substantially illusionary. His stock has been cut in half. He apparently got in a obscenity-laden shouting match with Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, over who was going to run the IRS and who was going to be able to make cuts. So he has announced that he is moving on. He has said that Doge is like Buddhism. Do you need Buddha for Buddhism? No, so I can go on. But he's leaving a smoldering wreckage of people who may or may not have been terminated, for departments that may or may not have been ransacked, for services that may or may not have been cut, for grants that may or may not ultimately pan out. And it's interesting, for all of the Doge cuts, nobody took credit for them in this new budget package. There's no these are all the things we saved with Doge that we're now able to take credit for in Congress. At the end of the day, it was an expensive, diversionary, time-wasting effort. There is no question that had he been focused, had he had people who actually knew how government worked, had he spoke with and dealt with department heads and the people in the departments who actually run things, that significant savings could have been achieved. And there may ultimately be savings that come out of this.
Right.
But it will be a fraction of what was promised and initially represented in this effort.
And maybe more cooperation with Congress as well, right?
Yes. These are people who, were dropped into this, who had no concept of how American government works. They missed Government 101 in 8th grade or whenever it's taught, and just simply thought they could do it the same way they would do it, at X or at some tech company. As I've often said, in government, process is our most important product. And these people had no idea what the process of government was. And government ate them alive.
There's been some elections going on, and you told me before we went on the air, they may be an indicator. I can't believe that they are, but you explained to me why they might be.
Well, they're green shoots. So you look and see, are they, particularly in a midterm where you've had a change of power, are things moving back? The Democrats won a New York State Senate seat. It was formerly held by a conservative Democrat. It's in the part of Brooklyn that's Orthodox Jewish. The Democrat that had the seat voted with and caucused with the Republicans. Now a traditional Democrat has come in and taken that seat. But in Pittsburgh, the progressive mayor, Ed Gainey, was defeated to a more traditional kitchen table Democrat named Corey O'Connor. But in Philadelphia, the Democratic DA, Larry Krasner, one of the George Soros DAs, won his Democratic primary with 64%. However, his Democratic opponent got 1,000 Republican write-in votes, so he will be on the ballot in November as the Republican. This continues to show that progressives mayors, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, Oakland, are having trouble. And prosecutors, it's a mixed bag. Krasner is probably the best of the group there and has been the best at keeping his job. But the Democrats are sort of reverting to mean in terms of, people who are kitchen table Democrats who are not the progressive woke kind of Democrats.
Right.
And that's working in their favor. And if that continues, that's going to make them a much more viable opponent for the Republicans coming up.
Okay. As we close this episode out, I want to ask you a fundamental question. Should or should not the head of the Department of Homeland Security have a grasp on what habeas corpus is?
Yeah, she's a major law enforcement official. All of them should. All of them should actually know what the Constitution says. They all swore to uphold it. Apparently, many of them haven't read it. And the answer that she gave was disgraceful. And at this point in time, we are beyond disgraced with the things that are going on in terms of the violation of due process, of civil rights, of legal procedures across the board throughout the administration. It is a disgraceful moment, and it is once again evidence of how Trump is being undermined by people who are incompetent in the jobs he's put them in.
I tried to make an excuse with somebody else that, okay, if it was the Department of Education head that didn't know what habeas corpus was, that'd be all right. And I was talked down and said, no, anybody that's in government needs to know what habeas corpus is. And but especially if you're in charge of Homeland Security, where there's going to be criminal activity that is going to be prosecuted, right?
Well, absolutely right. And of course, we are probably engaged in the greatest deprecation of civil liberties, since we rounded up the Japanese in World War II through the actions of this government. And they are ultimately, I think, going to be reversed by the courts. I would say also on the Department of Education, you would also expect that they would know what AI means as artificial intelligence, but she kept calling it A1. So there's issues there as well.
That's funny. All right. Well, I think we've got things kind of wrapped up in a nice package, and we're going to be back in a couple weeks for one more before we take some vacation. I know we're always on vacation, right, Keith? But
we try to be.
We'll try to be, absolutely. But we're going to do one more before we go on vacation, and we'll be back with that. Stay with us. We're going to be here. Red versus Blue on Spotify and iTunes and everywhere you can get a podcast. Like us, like our Facebook page, and we'll see you next time for another edition of Red versus Blue.
Thanks, everybody. Keep the faith.